Mack hit on this a year and a half ago. Got to give him credit. He said, you heard a housing bubble. He said, we're in a wide receiver bubble. We're paying these guys too much. And it's really interesting. So right now, DK Metcalf is $31 million against the cap. And I know he's good, but I was thinking about this driving to work this morning. Jamar Chase wants $40 million a year. Jamar Chase played last year, and with Joe Burrow, they couldn't make the playoffs. Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in league history through 5 years. He's never won a playoff game. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts threw for 18 regular season touchdown passes. Until this Super Bowl, the Chiefs had dominated the league, recycling wide receivers. The Bills got better without Stephon Diggs. The only time the Patriots and Brady had a great receiver like an all-timer was Randy Moss. Didn't win a Super Bowl. The last 3 seasons, NFL touchdown wide receiver leaders have a single playoff win. So it's not that I don't like receivers, but I'm going to talk about something that never gets discussed. In fact, I've never seen this discussed, even online. I'm sure it has been. What I like about wide receivers, do they move the chains? Do they get first downs? Edelman with Brady, Amon-Ra St. Brown with Goff, Puka with Stafford, Kittle with Brock Purdy, Dallas Goedert with Philadelphia. They move the chains. I've said this about the deep threat receiver. He's the convertible sports car of the NFL. Useless, flashy, fun, talked about, useless, December, January. So Amon-Ra St. Brown has 73 catches that resulted in first downs. That's what I want. Brock Bowers as a rookie tight end, and the Raiders were bad at quarterback, had 61 catches that resulted in first downs. DK Metcalf had 35 and was also the most penalized receiver since he entered the league. So half the time, because of tantrums, he's pulling you back to 1st and 30 or 1st and 20. So it's not that I don't like him, but Jim Harbaugh's career, everybody's like DK Metcalf, Chargers. If you go look at Jim Harbaugh's career, he doesn't have dominant number 1 receivers. Jim Harbaugh has coached in 6 either conference championships in college or conference championships in the NFL. That's a lot, 6. Who's his dominant number 1 receiver? That's not who he is. So I don't think this is a fit to the Chargers. I really don't. They moved off Bosa yesterday. They're going to draft an end rusher. I think of Harbaugh. I think of toughness. I think of O-line, D-line. I think of physicality. I think of risk-taking. I don't think wide receiver.
Okay. Man, life really is just endless pendulum swinging. When you're just navigating through life, it's just endless pendulums of popularity over here, and then it's something over there, and then it's this. No matter what it is, football, basketball, work, social media, TV, no movies, movies, no TV, actors, no singers. I mean, like, it's just like everything. I mean, like, it's just everything is constantly swinging. Talking about all these wide receivers, no great wide receiver has won this, that. They said the same thing about running backs. And that was the argument of why pay running backs, or, you know, and then, of course, obviously Saquon Barkley just, you know, bucked that trend. And again, to use a team like the Kansas City Chiefs as a reference point, first off, they have Travis Kelce, who's better than most number 1 wide receivers in the NFL when he's in his prime, and which is, you know, what he had been. That's number 1. Number 2, that team, they were not dominating the NFL in 23 and 24, and they were very much a defensive-led team, and their offense was a legitimate problem. And they got rocked against the Eagles, and they beat the 49ers, who Colin thinks was helmed by Brock Purdy, who's not a good quarterback. So hardly impressive. That defense held the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Championship game to a whopping 10 points. Okay, so yeah, those things matter. And again, you have Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kelsey, Spags, etc. And now what did the Chiefs go out and do? They went out and tried to get Worthy. Then they needed to make a play for DeAndre Hopkins. And now there's rumors that maybe they want DK Metcalf, or they want, Devontae, etc. So these things matter. Just to kind of downplay their importance is kind of absurd. And the lack of first downs, I don't know if that's necessarily on DK and more on how the offense is run. There's nowhere written in the stars that DK can't be getting all these first downs. It's how the offense is run. That says more about the coaching and the game plan and the execution than the player himself. I agree. I don't live and die by these big plays. So I do agree with that. But that's how the offense is run. That's not necessarily on the wide receiver. That's on coaching. And that's the signature of Andy Reid. These quick, short passes. And, the big players are great. Look at the Super Bowl. A couple big throws from Jalen Hurts to especially, to go up to 34. I forget the score already. Was it 34-0 at that point, or 34-3, or whatever it was? Might have been 34-0. That score sounds almost like fake. To Devontae, like, obviously exciting big play, but like, it was moving the chains. It was smart plays, but it was also the threat of all of this as well. Even though in the Super Bowl that one play was called back because of offensive pass interference, that was a big time throw. And that now signals to everyone, not only watching at home, but especially on the field and the coaching staff, of like, it was like 4th and short, and Jalen Hurts aired it out to a perfect pass deep to A.J. Brown, which if that wasn't called back would have been a massive play. But even the fact that they got called back was still a massive play. So, it's a combination of all of these things. It's never just this all or nothing binary situation. Well, we don't, these deep players, these deep threat players, it's irrelevant. No, because again, football, we say this all the time, yet we still lose sight of it. Complementary sport. The run game is really, really important in the playoffs, or just in general, but especially in the playoffs with the weather, etc. No denying it. But it doesn't mean that you just can't have a passing game. It doesn't mean that you can't have the threat. Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles are a great testament to this. They obviously prioritized the run game. They were a run-first team. But it worked because they had an awesome defense, as well as some of the most threatening wide receivers, where if you decided to really go all in on trying to stop the run, you would get absolutely annihilated. Now, if you just had Joe Schmo instead of A.J. Brown and Devontae, you're going to start looking a little bit closer to the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, it all depends on who your quarterback is. Because that run first also worked because you had Jalen Hurts who could also run. So now you had this whole extra threat. You had the RRPO, the run pass option. So it was really kind of like anything can happen. Not to mention you had a dominant defense. So we can't just circle and put our stamp in there and say, this is how you win football games. You don't need a wide receiver. You don't need this. No, it all depends on the team. You're right. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes didn't need a Tyreek Hill to win. They needed Travis Kelce. They needed an awesome defense. They needed to be in a position where they could outcoach inferior coaches. But then when they go up against a better team, you don't think a Tyreek Hill would have maybe helped the Kansas City Chiefs? You don't think DK Metcalf on the Chiefs would have helped them a little bit? I mean, everyone told me that they lost because, Rashee Rice wasn't there. Like, okay. Well, so which is it? So, it's not just this all or nothing thing. The conversation changes from team to team to team, especially. And sorry, Seattle Seahawks, but it's just like, you haven't been the gold standard in running offenses. Whether it was with the latter half of Russell Wilson's career or with Geno Smith. So, I get this wide receiver bubble, and I'm not saying that everyone should be going all in to get a Jamar Chase, because that is the thing. That's why football's complicated. You're right. The Bengals had T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, and they couldn't get into the playoffs. because they had an awful defense and lack of consistent run game, especially earlier on in the season. Yeah, that matters. That matters. But to think that, I mean, and this is what's so funny, because earlier in the season, Colin was talking about how the whole team runs through A.J. Brown. And then when A.J. Brown's on the field, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles are awesome. They're like, whatever that is, like they're 20-2 or something. And without A.J. Brown, they're like, 7-12. It's like it's everything's on fire. And now it's like, nah, you don't really need wide receivers. The deep threat is nice. It's a balance. And not to mention, you need to have a coach who knows how to utilize that deep threat, not only to actually take advantage of the deep threat itself, of some of these big plays, but then how to do all of the misdirection, the baiting of the defenses, like any of these types of things that keep the defense on its toes, that allows an offensive coordinator and an offense in general to just get after it. And that is what the Eagles were able to do throughout this season, which is why the offense is going to be different with A.J. Brown on or off the field, whether he's catching those balls or not, whether he's getting a big splash 30-yard play or not. Because you could look at certain games and say, look, A.J. Brown, he had like 2 catches for 10 yards, and Devontae had 3 catches for 37 yards. They didn't even need to be there. Under that logic, you could take them away and say they would still win. And that's not how it works. It's not how it works. But it's funny how we want to, pick and choose when we want to apply these. But then again, to use like history as a constant frame of reference, it's kind of silly to me when we talk about, oh, these are the teams that won and they didn't have this type of wide receiver or this type of running back. And it's just like, not to mention, a lot of these Super Bowls were won by like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, right? Like we're talking about like literally some of the best to ever do it, if not the best to ever do it. So should the Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks follow that same path forward? I'm not so sure about that. You can't. It's a copycat league, but you can't just copy and paste. The way how Tom Brady won is not going to be how, insert any other quarterback can win. We can use those as frames of references and build off of that, but it's not going to be one for one. And so, yeah, the pendulum is going to keep swinging. 1 minute, everyone's going to be so quick to pay these wide receivers. The next minute, they're going to pull back. And that is the problem with these great players. They command and want so much money. The problem continues to be is that it's really hard to win when any great player takes up so much of the money. So realistically speaking, I think probably the biggest thing that we kind of learn over these years, at least how football is played right now, and that's the great thing about football, it can completely change. It can completely change just by the virtue of what does the talent saturation look like in the NFL right now, the coaching situation, the quarterback situation. But right now, it very much feels like you're better off having a collection of good and great players that are highly well coached, rather than having the top talent in the league, flushed with all the all pros and this, that, and you got to pay them all this money. And then it's just like, oh man, we're going to have to let go of this guy, that guy. And coaching and this or that. It's just like, have some just good to great players and have, great coaching, and you're going to win. You're better off with that than having the best quarterback of all time. But like, we really can't afford now to build the O-line, and the defense is old now, and we don't have enough money in free agency. Like, yeah, you can win, but gets a little dicey. He says the Kansas City Chiefs dominated the league for the last 3 years. Like, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. The regular season in 23 was not domination. Not domination at all. Again, defensive led. And then this past year, yeah, they had the number 1 record. They dominated teams. Like, every game they won was like, ugh. That's why people were kind of like, are the Chiefs really that good? And then they went into against a great team like the Eagles, and it was like, nope. See ya, bye. So, you know, you got to be willing to update your framework and also acknowledge that it's different depending on the situation. Yes, an Andy Reid will be able to find ways to win, especially with like someone like a Patrick Mahomes, will be able to find ways to win when he has a great supportive defense and doesn't have a lot of weapons. Andy Reid's the best at that. Shanahan, not so much. Shanahan needs the weapons. He's proven that. Give him weapons and the dude can make magic. Can the dude find ways to win games when he doesn't have it? No, not as much. Is he better than all of these other coaches except for like an Andy Reid at maximizing the weapons that he has when you give him great pieces? Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, all coaches have different skill sets. You know, Phil Jackson probably is not great at taking average talent and making them great. But he's awesome at making great and elite talent literally the best that they could ever be. It's just different levels. There's different types of coaching. So it all depends on what a team needs. The level of coach you have, the level of quarterback you have. We're always constantly trying to find these rules to make sense of everything. And I get it, because I want those too in my own life, not only in my football life, because I think about this all the time, especially when I first started really, making videos more in depth and watching football games. I'm like, how can I consistently make sense? Like, what parameters can I look at a game? What other checklist, whether it's through the box score, through watching the game, like, what can I do that just makes sense? And then it stressed me out because there's times that I'm looking at a game and I'm like, wow, this team won, 35-14, but they were 3 for 8, 3 for 10 on third down. And then I see another game where I'm like, wow, this team was 8 for 16 on third down, but then they lost by 20. And I'm just like, and I know third downs are so important. I'm just like, how can I make sense of this? How did this game unfold in that way? Is there an easy way to like recognize this? Wow, this team had 470 total yards, but they only put up 14 points. Were there any turnovers? No, there were no turnovers. So I can't blame the turnovers. Like, what, and it's just not. It's not that binary. If it was, everything would be so easily calculated. And like I always say, sports betting would be the easiest thing ever. You wouldn't just have Wall Street. You would have all those guys have offices in Vegas. And they would just be crunching the numbers, calculating everything, boom. And gambling probably wouldn't even exist because it would be too guaranteed to make money. So every time we think we have a hard and fast rule, it'll change. Right now, we're all talking about the trenches, the O-line, the D-line. Just wait, man. Just wait. That'll swing. That'll change either. Eventually, people are going to say, we learned that you don't really need a pass rush. It's nice to have. But look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They just won 2 Super Bowls in a row, and they have no pass rush. Why? Because they doubled down on tight ends. They have 3 number 1 tight ends. That's what football is right now. It's the tight ends. Spend your money on wide receivers, running backs, and, defensive ends. It's tight ends. That's where it is. And watch, it'll happen. It'll happen. Maybe not tomorrow, but like it's constantly swinging, constantly changing. Where's it going to be? Nobody knows. What rules are the NFL going to randomly change? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I wouldn't be shocked if one day we find ourselves back in like a more statue pocket quarterback era and it's less mobility. Or I imagine one day we're going to reach a point where like you're going to have more often quarterbacks only throwing the ball like 15 times. I said this before. I did like a little daydream in my mind of like, what would the Philadelphia Eagles look like, or the Baltimore Ravens for that matter, if they had Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry? Like, how could you stop that? If you have 2 insane running backs, both who run very differently, and you have a running quarterback, I'm just like, I wish I was more of an offensive coordinating genius so I could like actually conceptualize like how could that even look? Because to me, I'm just like, how do you stop that? how do you stop that? You know, even the Ravens, I think they rush the ball in the playoffs against the Steelers like 50 times or something, you know, something outrageous. Like, you know, we're gonna see the game continue to evolve and change. 1 minute it was just pass, 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 pass. Now it's less. Then it was offense, 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 and now it's like, huh, defense really matters. You know, D line, D line, D line. Well, actually, O line. So that's my long-winded answer of don't be so don't be so confident with some of the conclusions you draw with an ever-changing landscape of the NFL. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? What do you think the market will be or should be for DK Metcalf? And how do you feel about Colin talking about that we are in a wide receiver bubble? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. It's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here. And I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.